told me you thought I was meant for more than this. Did you mean that?
Every word.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where this week we continue our exploration of Captain America: The First Avenger. My name is Steve Morris. I am a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roque. I'm a writer, producer, host, and voiceover guy here in San Diego, California, and excited to be going back in time to the 1940s for the next part of our discussion on Captain America: The First Avenger.
It's like for a moment there, you didn't know who you were. Like,
yeah.
Maybe you thought you were like a scrawny little 90-pound guy and didn't realize that you had been given the serum to turn you into the super outlaw.
I love you, brother, but I've never been scrawny my entire life.
Well, we are once again thrilled to welcome back to our microphones actor, writer, and Geek Buddy Shannon McClung. Welcome back to the Cine-Files.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. There's nothing like starting your morning off with a cup of iced Joe and a chat about an underappreciated entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Ooh, nice.
Well, I don't think it's underappreciated by any of us. I think we have gone through an unbelievably great first half of a Marvel film.
Agreed.
And this is my thing about this movie. Everything we have done up to this point, it might be in my top 2 or 3 Marvel films.
Wow. And
the second half of the movie, I like.
It's about to level out, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And what's so funny is having, rewatched it and gone through my notes and thought about it, I don't have quite a diagnosis on why I don't love it as much as I love the first half. I like it, but it doesn't pack the emotional wallop that the first half of the film has for me.
Challenge accepted. Let's keep going. Challenge accepted. You're wrong, but we'll go forward.
Well, let's jump right into it, because we go from this incredibly exciting, thrilling chase where we first see Steve Rogers with his Captain America powers chase down a hydra agent, jump into the water, pull him out of a submarine, and where he kills himself. And now we cut back to our bad guys. We're marching through these tunnels. This is all shot in Shepperton in England. Mm-hmm. And by the way, they do like totally the Star Trek corridor trick, which is there's only one tunnel. That's all there is. And then they shoot it, one way, they shoot it the other way, they shoot in close shots. So they make it look like there's a maze of, corridors through this whole factory area, but there really isn't. And what is happening is that a bunch of Nazis have shown up, and they are pretty critical of Johann Schmidt.
Your Hydra division has failed to deliver so much as a rifle in over a year. And we had learned through local intelligence you had mounted a full-scale incursion into Norway.
This is a lot of fun because you get to see, they did a really great job casting these guys. They have that very stereotypical villain, really accentuated cheekbones, kind a little bit gaunt, that perfectly slicked back hair. The one has a very villainous mustache. Great job casting.
And I love how condescending they are towards Schmidt. And then the big moment is when they say,
"The Führer feels, how does he put it? The Red Skull has been indulged long enough."
Yeah. So do you think in this moment, this has been a nickname of his even before he became this thing? Like his desire for blood, his like no equivocation about killing. They, in essence, call him the Red Skull because he's almost inhuman and bathed in blood. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because I thought it was odd to have them call him that as if he's already been known as some supervillain. That would have gotten out somehow that the Red Skull exists.
I think it's an insult. Yeah. I think, this is this guy who meddled with things he wasn't quite prepared for, and the result is this monstrosity that he's become that, a lot of people probably haven't seen. But as you said, John, the news of this spread across the army about, one, he'd fallen out of favor, but also in doing so, he's become this monster, essentially.
I think, I definitely think it's an insult. And B, my gut has always been that they know that he has this, that he turned into this thing.
Okay.
Like that's always been my gut. But what I don't think they know is I don't think they necessarily know that he's super strong. And I think they all think of him as a joke,
Right. One of those crazy, because remember, he's a scientist.
Right.
First. So naturally, soldiers always look down. Well, not always, but like most of the time when we see them, they look down on scientists. So why would they have respect for him considering he's been in a lab the whole time, right?
Well, Andy's a scientist who's chasing after like gods and weird stuff and injected himself. Yeah. And I love Hugo Weaving's just slow turn, and you're like, oh boy, they're in for it. And then he's very polite.
Gentlemen, you have come to see the results of our work. Let me show you.
We head into the lab, and there's several things going on at once. The first thing is Schmidt sort of insulting Hitler and talking about how his failures. One of the other things going on is that one of these Nazis goes up and is examining this map. And the third thing that's going on is that Schmidt is pulling off the covers on some weapons and doing some stuff that he's going to do some demonstration.
Hydra is assembling an arsenal to destroy my enemies in one stroke, wherever they are, regardless of how many forces they possess, all in a matter of hours.
And of course, these guys who are visiting pick up on
your enemies.
I know, it's a very Colonel Klink like take. Your enemies?
Organ.
I would love that if it said that in the script. Colonel Klink take.
Thank you, Schmidt.
For what?
For making it clear how obviously mad you are.
And at this moment, the guy that has been examining the map realizes that
Berlin is on this map.
That surprised me. I didn't catch that the first couple of times I saw the movie. The first few times I saw the movie, I didn't quite capture that he was going to turn his anger towards Hitler and towards the Nazis. So it makes you question, this guy no longer belongs to a party, right? This guy is all about, as we said from the opening shot of him there in the rubble, standing atop the rubble. He wants to stand atop of the rubble of the entire world for himself.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he's going to go back and even kill Hitler and all the Nazis, it's kind of an interesting way to reassess Red Skull, right? To him, everyone is a nail and he's a hammer. So
great way to put that.
Yes, absolutely. I think he sees
that just a means to an end. I think
exactly.
Kill Hydra too. Yeah.
That's a great point. Is that he doesn't care. He believes that he is destined to take over the world. That's crazy supervillains. And I love that all these guys who just showed up are now threatening the Red Skull in his lab while he's about to demonstrate his weapons.
Can I say one thing real quick? The shots to Toby Jones, as this is Zola's face as it's all happening, is so perfect because he's giving us a guide map as an audience of what to feel in these moments, because his growing terror about what's going to happen here is so great. Because he's just like, am I going to survive in this situation? So
well, I think also the acting of Hugo Weaving here, this great moment as the machine is warming up and he's sort of putting in the calculations to take these dudes out. Like he's got this silent, like 1, 2, 3, like he counts them, like spots them, where they are in the room. And then as the cannon starts, just wasting these dudes, like he misses one and you see this great shot of like, damn, I missed. I mean, it's the expression that I feel like a lot of golf courses see.
It's so funny. I'm just thinking that I think the Red Skull and Zola might be my favorite supervillain henchmen of the MCU.
That's absolutely Renfield and Dracula. Absolutely. Please.
Totally. And I think Toby Jones is so good. All his reaction shots, you're totally right. He does all this amazing stuff.
Yeah.
He's just trying to make it to tomorrow.
I think it's how Shannon looks when me and Vogel go at it about something. He's just kind of watching if he's going to survive.
I'm trying to figure out which one of you is the supervillain, and
I think it depends on the subject. I think.
Needless to say, Schmidt wipes all these guys out, and then what I love is then after we do this, we get a Hail Hydra from the guards, and then there is a look over at Zola. Where's your Hail Hydra? Apparently they did 14 different takes with Toby Jones because they weren't sure which one was the right one. They was like, let's do an enthusiastic one. Let's do a really scared one. Let's do an angry one. Let's do a frustrated one. Let's do a confused one. And then they just picked the one which I would describe as faux enthusiastic / nervous. That's how I would describe the one that they actually picked.
Hail Hydra!
If I'm given that direction in the room, faux enthusiasm slash nervous, I know exactly what to do. I will just channel Toby Jones from Captain America.
And we cut from there to Steve Rogers giving blood. And the needle does not go through his arm now because his arms have gotten quite a bit bigger.
Any hope of reproducing the program is locked in your genetic code. But without Dr. Erskine, it would take years.
He deserved more than this.
If it could work only once, he'd be proud it was you.
Now we're back with Colonel Phillips and the senator, and they're arguing about what has happened. And Howard Stark is looking at the sub, and he says,
well, speaking modestly, I'm the best mechanical engineer in this country. But I don't know what's inside this thing or how it works.
Did you guys know that the Germans actually did have like little mini subs in World War II?
I did not.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's nothing like what we're seeing in this film, but they did have little I think it was one-person subs. There was a name for it that is escaping me right now. But after the last time we recorded, I was like, I think I remember seeing this on the History Channel, and sure enough, yeah, that's true.
People today can't really grasp how close they came to really winning. Like people just don't get it because we did eventually win. If that idiot doesn't go into Russia, if he doesn't exceed his grasp, there's a very real possibility that he could have taken over entirely, and we would have just created relations with him in order to survive within the geopolitical structure. Like people don't even know how close they came because as nutty as he was forcing and pushing people to create all this stuff so that they could, because he had inspired so many to be just insanely dialed into their evil.
Yeah.
It's a great point. I think to me, there's like three things. One is don't go into Russia.
Yeah.
This is like Napoleon messed it up. Don't do that.
Yeah.
If the Japanese don't bomb Pearl Harbor, we come into the war much later, if 100%. Ever.
We didn't want to go in the war. People forget we did not want to go in that war. Yeah.
And if they, they have the V1 rockets and they were working on atomic bombs.
Right.
They get another year to develop an atomic bombs paired with V1 rockets. Yeah, that's deep shit.
Sir, if you're going after Schmidt, I want in.
You're an experiment. You're going to Alamogordo.
The serum worked.
I asked for an army, and all I got was you. You are not enough.
This is the beginning of where I don't understand Colonel Phillips.
Okay.
I totally get the hard-ass drill sergeant being tough and abusive and difficult, and that's what you got to do to turn these guys into soldiers. I totally get that. Mm-hmm. But he saw Steve Rogers throw himself on a grenade. He saw him chase down a Nazi through the streets of New York, dive in, take out a submarine, and pull this guy out. And now he's still being dismissive of him, and that's what I don't understand.
I was going to say, that's what drives Steve. A great leader knows how to manage, which is, and the greatest coaches in sports always know how to manage their players individually and as a group, right? So for Steve, he is motivated by people not believing in him and people discounting him. So just because he's got muscles now and these skills, he doesn't all of a sudden mentally become someone else, right? Like a former fat person who loses weight is still in their mind a fat person, right? That takes a long mental journey to kind of climb out of that. And this is way too soon for Steve to not still be motivated by this. So I think what he's doing is defaulting to these things that have motivated Steve from the beginning. And so he has to keep him motivated because he does know Steve's not enough. And he's speaking the truth at this point, but he knows this is also the other way to motivate him. So he's killing two birds with one stone, in essence, giving Steve the lay of the land, but also keeping him dialed in and motivated. So that later, when he does kind of break out and he's doing it against the colonel's orders to prove something to him, and maybe in some deceptive way, this is what he wanted him to do all along.
So you think Phillips is doing this on purpose?
Possibly. I don't put it past. I mean, I don't think Phillips got to that position by accident, man. The guy knows what he's doing.
And see, I don't think it's Phillips's intention. I think also Phillips is not the supreme commander of the armed forces, that if someone above him says this guy's going to Alamogordo to be a lab experiment, he can't really, there's not much he can do to push back against an order from a superior.
Right.
But also, I mean, I think he does see the realistic nature of the situation in that, yes, it worked on you. You are one person. You are not an army would make a difference. One man is not going to move the needle. And again, that's part of the character journey of Steve Rogers that we find out that it is that one man can make a difference.
Yeah, and also one more thing. I mean, like, we've never seen a super soldier in action. So neither Phillips has never seen that. So he has no idea what he has. He has no idea what this guy can do. So he defaults to this belief that one guy isn't enough, as Shannon just said. Yeah.
So I think the idea that Phillips is intentionally, training Steve essentially, or that Phillips is, that there's higher powers involved, those totally make sense. I don't see either of those in the movie. Like that, I don't see any indication that that's what's going on. What I see is Phillips being dismissive of Steve, and I see that not just now, but I see it multiple times going forward. And that's where it just doesn't track right for me. And it goes back to, like, this is part of why I would wish that Steve didn't do quite as well in that first Captain America sequence, where he was trying to figure out his powers and wasn't quite used to them, because that would make more sense to me why Phillips was dismissive in this moment.
But script wise, why would you want the person? You need an antagonist, even on the good side. You need someone.
Absolutely.
So that's what I think the purpose that he serves. So to me, it works story wise because everyone else is on Steve's side. You got to have one person who's on Steve's side of the ledger, who doesn't 100% believe he can do it, so Steve can keep trying to prove it. And we as the audience keep seeing him as the underdog and wanting him to break out from this control.
I totally agree that we should have, that we need an antagonist. I don't think it feels consistent within his character. Like that's the, when you're
Phillips' character is what you're saying.
Yeah, when you're writing, it's like, okay, I need an antagonist, and part of it is that once he switches, they want us to go like, oh, this is a great guy, part of the team. Phillips is awesome, and I feel, and that's the thing, is it doesn't feel consistent for me for his character.
Okay,
Senator Brandt, he's got a great plan for Steve Rogers. He's already in the newspaper. Recruiting has gone up, cousin. We got an American hero.
You want to serve your country on the most important battlefield of the war.
Sir, that's all I want.
Then congratulations. You just got promoted.
Cut to. He's in really like the original Captain America uniform.
I don't know if I can do this.
Nothing to it. You sell a few bonds buy bullets, bullets kill Nazis. Bing, bang, boom.
And we hear this song start up. And Captain America walks out into this big, huge musical number, which, by the way, was written by Alan Menken.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I want to say the brilliance of this sequence is, as you're watching a movie for the first time, like you get the sense that as they end that scene, like, son, you just got promoted. You're like, all right, here we go. And because you're kind of taking everything in, you might not necessarily realize what that music is in the background, and the fact that Steve Rogers is looking nervous. This is a Steve Rogers we've seen before. Right. And the moment that he puts on that hood and they push him out into this Busby Berkeley like dance sequence, it's so brilliant. And also, now I can't remember totally, but I'm pretty sure not a frame of this sequence is in the marketing, in the trailers.
Oh, wow.
So when this big musical number starts, it's so, for the audience, it's so jarring, but it's so entertaining and very, very funny, especially when he starts knocking out Hitler.
the Hitler sneaking up through the crowd and the little kids going, look, he's behind you.
Yeah,
look out. Is great.
Yeah.
I also love they do a great job of, in the very first one, he is nervous. He's reading off of his shield.
Not all of us can storm a beach or drive a tank, but there's still a way all of us can fight.
Who vows to fight like the man for what's right, night and day?
Which, by the way, the shield is like that sort of that classic shield shape, and that is the shape of Cap's shield in the very first Captain America comic book.
Oh, wow.
And the reason that it got changed is that there was a character called the Shield in Archie Comics, and they threatened to sue Timely Comics because of copying the shield. And they go, well, I guess we'll just switch it to a round shield. It ended up being this brilliant thing because then we got all this cool stuff out of the shield that we wouldn't have gotten if they had kept the other shield.
Can you imagine the history of Captain America in comics if he didn't have that round shield if they had kept the more kind of triangular version the whole time.
Dodecahedron.
And he does definitely get better at this job.
Yeah.
And to the point where he's even like, they make movies with Captain America, and he's watching himself in his movies, and he's smiling and he's enjoying it. And I think at this moment, he kind of feels good about what he's doing.
Yeah. He definitely he feels like he's in service, not necessarily the way he thought he was going to be, but he is, especially from the senator. He feels like he is helping the cause. He is doing his part. He's not just throwing scrap into a wagon, like little Timmy, which he saw in that film at the beginning. And also like throughout, even as he's getting more and more popular and he's getting more confident, you can see, even though this is a montagey sequence, that he never loses that Steve Rogers-ness. Like when he's in the theater without the uniform, like when he's in just his regular kind of khaki uniform, you see like he's smiling, like he's a little not embarrassed, but he's enjoying it, but he's not cocky about it. And when that first woman comes up and gets his autograph, like you just see the shock on his face. I mean, it's not a guy who is like, oh, I can look at all this stuff I can do now. Let me take the ball and run. Like this is still very much the 90-pound guy that we meet at the beginning.
And then he's still doing the show, and he is on a stage, and he says,
how many of you are ready to help me sock old Adolf on the job?
And there's dead silence. And we cut to, he's not in front of a bunch of kids in America anymore. He's in front of a bunch of soldiers in Europe.
Yeah.
And they are not fans.
I love this scene. It's such a brilliant scene to throw in there because it's true, right? I mean, like, it's cool that you're playing for the kids, but this is like people are really dying. People are really out here sacrificing their lives. And here you are playing this character to motivate people. And quite a lot of people had issues with some of the USO shows and some of the other, because they thought it was just kind of a way to appease these soldiers from the terrible treatment they were getting overseas. And it was a bit of an insult. So this is a kind of a subversive, kind of brilliantly subversive moment to have in this movie where you're seeing these soldiers who are like, dude, we've been, out in the middle of the, in this war, suffering away from our families. And you're going to come out here in a safe situation, hang out with the ladies and do the things that you're doing. And we're supposed to respect you. It's like there's this pushback, and I thought it was kind of brilliant to throw this in here, and it added even more to this idea that like, hey, he was serving his country, but there was something more he was destined for, and it took this moment to really kind of drive it home to him because he wants the respect of his fellow soldiers and peers.
Well, and it's, as he is getting heckled by the crowd, like you hear in his voice when he says, "Come on, guys, we're all on the same team here."
Yeah.
And he knows that on a base level, that's true. But these guys are doing something he is not doing because he's not allowed to yet. And you get a sense of that kind of that shame that he knows he should be doing more. And the fact that I think they're in Italy, it says, but the fact that they're so well supplied that they start throwing tomatoes at him. I think maybe don't throw your food. Don't weaponize your food. You're going to need that later.
By the way, have you ever showed up at a show with a tomato, a piece of lettuce, some fruit?
That's my favorite line in Batman Returns with Danny DeVito. How come there's always someone that brings eggs and tomatoes to a speech?
It seems like a weird plan. By the way, I think I'd be thinking about like, well, how would I, because I don't love the second half as much as I love the first, how would I change it? One change I think I would make is that I would have, we're going to meet the people who are essentially the Howling Commandos later on. I'd have them in this audience and have them be the people that are actually jeering at Cap. And then they march off on the mission, which is the mission where they get captured. That way, when Cap shows up later, they can have a negative reaction to him at first. And there's more that he has to win over with them.
I think that's actually an interesting idea, Steve. I think this moment really kind of solidifies the bond between he and Peggy. But that's a really good idea because I mean, we'll get to it when we get to that scene, but yeah, that's a good idea.
Because we don't get the Howling Commandos that long in the movie, so it's another scene to put them in, which I think would have been great. Because I think that's one of the biggest crimes of the movie, if I have any criticism, is that we don't get the Howling Commandos for anywhere near as long as we should have, and we should have gotten a series with these guys.
Totally.
I wish Disney Plus was doing series back then, because I think we would have gotten a Howling Commando series, which would have been awesome.
I would love it. I would love it. It's later, and he is drawing a monkey on a unicycle.
That was quite a performance.
Yeah, I had to improvise a little bit. Crowds I'm used to are usually more 12.
He says, at least he's got me doing this. Phillips would have sent me to a lab.
And these are your only two options. A lab rat or a dancing monkey. You were meant for more than this, you know.
All fair arguments. This is not necessarily, John, and you'll be able to speak to this better than I could. This is not Steve's choice. When you are in the military, you don't have a whole lot of agency. You have to go where your superiors tell you.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because Peggy is the original I guess I would say, to be honest, she's kind of the original Avenger in a way, because she also breaks the rules when she thinks she has to break the rules. She uses her own powers, so to speak, human powers, to be able to do that. In a way, she's encouraging Steve to kind of break the rules a little bit here, while she's sympathizing with it. But Shannon's right. You got to follow the rules or else you can get court-martialed. And listen, he didn't go through basic training. He didn't go through the standard soldier route. He was put into a special program. He was given a serum within 2 weeks, and then boom, he becomes Captain America. So the other guys have been through the training and through the hell and been been camped out in these various cities in Europe, fighting the Nazis and the Italians and not the Japanese, I guess, but that'd be in the Pacific. But yeah, so they've endured that shit. He hasn't. So in a way, this is Peggy kind of asking a little bit too much of him, or trying to inspire a little bit too much of him. But she also sees the possibilities here, and so she's trying to unlock them.
By the way, it really was raining on the day they shot this. And it actually was storming so much that they had to shut down the shoot because of lightning strikes.
Oh, wow.
And then we see wounded coming in.
Yeah, man.
And we hear that 200 men went up against one of Schmidt's forces and only 50 returned. And that this was the 107th. We go to see Colonel Phillips because he wants to know what happened to Bucky Barnes.
Well, if it isn't the Star-Spangled Man with a plan, what is your plan today?
I need the casualty list from Mazzano.
You don't get to give me orders, son.
This is where I really love Tommy Lee Jones's performance. I mean, I think this is probably not a lot of effort for Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
This is a role that he has done many times in his sleep. But that shot to Peggy, like, you and I are gonna have a conversation you're not gonna enjoy. And when he starts to spell Barnes, I can spell. Like, he's so I mean, for me, so wonderful in this part.
Yeah. And look, he's a disciple of Patton. So he's going to be this cantankerous, angry, frustrated guy, you know what I'm saying? And talking down to the soldiers at times. And so, yeah. But, he's like a pseudo father figure for Cap in a way that he has to prove it to his dad that he can do it. And his dad doesn't believe in him. His dad should be on his side. But, the entertainment is littered with father-son issues. And certainly Marvel is very littered with Marvel-son issues. So father-son issues. So this feels like that too.
It's funny. So Cap's father was killed in the war.
Yeah.
His mother died in a TB ward. His pseudo-father was assassinated at the moment he became Captain America. And now we've got his third father figure being kind of a jerk to him.
Yeah. Sometimes that third stepfather. It's a tough situation.
Are you planning a rescue mission?
Yeah, it's called winning the war.
But if you know where they are, why not at
They're
least
30 miles behind the lines, through some of the most heavily fortified territory in Europe. We'd lose more men than we'd save. But I don't expect you to understand that because you're a chorus girl.
Oof.
Well, again, this is where I don't get Phillips. Like, his character doesn't. But what I love what you said, Shannon, is that this is not that tough of Tommy Lee Jones. It's funny to think of like these actors who are really amazing actors who could come in and like, yeah, I could do that. I could do that role in my sleep.
I think I understand just fine.
Well, then understand it somewhere else. If I read the posters correctly, you got someplace to be in 30 minutes.
It was funny. The thing that I wrote down here as I was looking at Chris Evans is the thing that he has to do that people would think is really easy, but is actually really hard, is be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and making honest interesting. is a challenge. Making noble interesting is a challenge, because as performers, you want the characters, with the darkness, because that's what you get to play. That's where you get to show off a little bit. But the fact that he does get to play things so straight arrow, and he's still so magnetic on screen, like that's a trait of a very talented performer.
Yeah, and I also think it's brilliant that they surround him with the darkness, so he doesn't have to provide it. He's the antithesis to the darkness, so it makes him stand out even more. So his earnestness and authenticity in the earnestness, which I think you make a great point of pointing out, Steve, is what separates him, and that's what makes us cheer for him from the beginning, because everyone else is gray or dark. He isn't,
It's funny, John, you brought up at the beginning that this idea that this disproves the Superman, we can't do Superman myth.
Yeah.
And this is the key to it, is that being a good guy is not easy, even if you have superpowers.
As the boys will show you, if you ever watch that series on Amazon Prime.
By the way, I just started watching season 3 last night. There's a lot of stuff there.
Those first 10 minutes. I'm not ruining it. 10 minutes. Oh my.
It is as not Captain America as you can possibly believe.
Yeah, and someone commented today, because we dropped our first part today as we're recording this, the second part, but that how perfect our timing was, which we didn't plan on this, that because Soldier Boy is coming in this season, which is essentially their version of Captain America. So it's kind of ironic that we're talking about Captain America as season 3 opens from the boys.
We are in this tent and Cap is getting ready for something. You'll notice that it's very foggy out. And the reason it's foggy out is because we're in the Hollywood Hills, because this is a pickup shoot.
What do you plan to do? Walk to Austria?
If that's what it takes.
You heard the Colonel. Your friend is most likely dead.
You don't know that.
Even so, he's devising a strategy. If he detects
By the time he's done that, it could be too late.
Steve!
You told me you thought I was meant for more than this. Did you mean that?
Every word.
Good to have a Peggy in your corner, man.
Yeah. Haley Atwell. Just dinging him in the parking lot.
I love, by the way, that we cut to one of the chorus girls going, "Where's my helmet?" And now we're in a plane, because Peggy does believe in him. And not only does she believe in him, she gets Howard Stark to help us out. And we are flying him into Austria, wherever they have to go.
Agent Carter, if we're not in too much of a hurry, I thought we could stop off in Lucerne for a late night fondue.
Always macking that, Stark. Always macking.
Which, by the way, fondue is delightful. And I can remember, I believe it was a Shannon McClung birthday party at a fondue restaurant.
Oh,
that's right.
Yes.
At the Melting Pot in Pasadena.
Yep.
Cheese and bread. It's delightful.
Just cheese and bread.
Cheese and bread.
But Steve Rogers doesn't really know what fondue is. And he is immediately jealous and insecure. And then immediately they're under fire.
As soon as I'm clear, turn this thing around and get the hell out of here! You can't give me orders! The hell I can't! I'm a captain!
And he jumps out of the plane. Has Steve Rogers ever jumped out of a plane before?
I'm going to say no.
I mean, it's possible. It's possible in that 2 weeks of training they could have done something like this, but it's I think it lends more to the heroism of Steve Rogers if he's never done it.
Yeah.
My guess is this is his first time. And then we cut to this kind of high-tech jail, and we see this guy with a hat getting pushed into a jail cell.
You know, Fritz, one of these days I'm going to have a stick of my own.
And I remember watching this the first time and going, howling commandos. Because that like bowler hat or whatever, it's just so recognizable.
Dum Dum Dugan.
And Dum Dum Dugan was played by Neil McDonough. I mean, so the Howling Commandos are like this, war comic book, and it was Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos.
Yes.
Before there's Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I agree with you, John. I really wish there was more of them in this movie and that we could have done more of them.
Yeah. I mean, Neil McDonough is the only one who gets a little bit of elbow room to play, partly because he's the most distinct looking with the bowler hat and the enormous mustache. But all of those guys do such a good job. Like Kenneth Choi, Derek Luke. I mean, they all do a really, really good job. And if you catch them, I think they made an appearance on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Agent Carter.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because at the time it was still in that nebulous area. Is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. part of the MCU? And it's like you watch them in First Avenger and then you watch them on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's like, yeah, there's a very clear distinction between these two mediums.
Yeah, they were on Agent Carter. Yeah.
Which I never watched.
First season's great.
Second season, it's kind of like I think they realized they weren't long for staying on the air, and you could tell as you were watching it. There wasn't as much support or budget, I think.
Yeah, and the first season, not a whole lot of people watched it.
Yeah,
I think
sadly.
more people have seen it now that's been on Disney Plus. But that first season, I mean, Haley Atwell, we already knew that Haley Atwell's an incredible performer. But then Shea Wiggum as well plays like her boss, and he is outstanding.
Cap is kind of running through the trees. He gets to this, big factory installation where the bad guys are. Truck goes by, jumps into the truck. I really like that we only see the fight through the canvas of the truck. And he heads in through the gate, and we are now inside, and we're back to where these, all these prisoners are being held, and the cell is below, and they can look up through the bars above them, and there they see Cap coming through and knocking people out.
Who are you supposed to be?
Captain America.
And the English guy, pardon?
By the way, we should say I really love the evolution of his costume.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. The behind the scenes, I think they have some of it on Disney Plus, but on the Blu-ray they have a section devoted to the costume, because it was kind of like, okay, for the MCU, we translate things, we have to make tweaks, and looking at his costume, his comics accurate costume with the wings on the side and the red pirate boots, it just doesn't really work. But the way that they were able to still use that for his USO outfit, and you see the slow build to what he ends up being in. I mean, it's awesome.
Totally. It's a really good progressive design to make it more practical as we go along. And so he's getting these prisoners out, and we see this one guy who is Japanese, and we hear,
What, are we taking everybody?
I'm from Fresno, Ace.
And this is one of the Howling Commandos. This is Jim Morita. It's played by Kenneth Choi, who apparently huge comic book fan. So he was having a ball with.
I got to work with him on 911. We were in sort of parallel scenes. We were in the same van. What a nice guy. What a really, really nice guy. And the fact that he gets to come back later as Morita's grandson,
right,
as the principal in Spider-Man Homecoming.
That's right.
Just awesome. And in his office, he has a black and white photo of essentially himself, but of his grandfather in his
right.
Now I have to watch that again because I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. When he gets in the van, did you say, "What, are we taking everybody?" Did you say that?
Oh, if only I'd had the guts.
Looking for Sergeant James Barnes.
There's an isolation ward in the factory, but no one's ever come back from it.
All right. The tree line is northwest, 80 yards past the gate. Get out fast and give him hell. I'll meet you guys in the clearing with anybody else I find.
Wait. You know what you're doing?
Yeah. I've knocked that Adolf Hitler over 200 times.
And so now we get two things going on at once. One is we get all of these prisoners in a jailbreak where they're going to, bust through these guards, grab the fancy high-tech hydra weapons, and get their way out. While simultaneously, we have Cap going to find Bucky. One of the things that's also happening is that Schmidt and Zola are watching this happen on their closed circuit TVs. And I suddenly went, man, I know that it's been stated that Suri is the most brilliant person in the Marvel Universe. Zola's got to be right up there.
Oh, Zola, yeah.
Because he was in the 40s. I mean,
in the 40s.
I mean, he was dealing with a lot less. He had a lot less resources to do the things that he did. He had the Tesseract, but everything else. I mean, the Tesseract was just the powering mechanism. All the other designs, those came from him.
Yeah. And he wasn't sitting on the largest, stock of vibranium anywhere in the world. And he didn't have a giant fortune and was the child of Howard Stark.
His people make clocks.
Our soon-to-be Howling Commandos, they jump into a tank an African-American guy can translate the controls.
I didn't know you spoke German.
3 semesters at Howard. Switch to French. Girls much cuter.
And that character is Gabe Jones, played by Derek Luke. Gabe Jones is one of the first African-American characters ever in comics.
Does he predate Sam Wilson?
I believe so.
Wow.
I believe so. And to the point where when it went to the printing, they recolored his character because they thought the dark skin was a mistake.
Yikes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty early. And then Steve finds Bucky, who is lying down, obviously being experimented on. What is happening to Bucky at this moment?
I mean, I believe they're giving him something that leads to his Winter Soldier transformation down the line. Because we see, I believe it's in Winter Soldier, like we see a flashback of Zola. You see the POV of Bucky, and you hear Zola calling him Lieutenant Barnes, and something like basically explaining very broadly what they've done to him.
So this is it's not the version of the super soldier serum that the Red Skull got, and it's not the version of the super soldier serum that Steve got. It's some other version that Zola has worked on.
Yeah. Some bastardized version.
Did you know any of this was happening when you first saw this movie?
I mean, I knew of the existence of the Winter Soldier, but I did not assume, like, even though, like, I think we see Zola run out of the room as Steve goes in, I did not get the sense at the time that they were doing experiments on him. I thought, like, he was being interrogated.
Yeah. Yeah, I defaulted to experiments, but I didn't default to super soldier because, I mean, you hear all the stories of the Nazis and the experiments that they did on people who were in captivity and the Jewish people as well. And so it's just like, to me, that's where my mind went, but not specifically super soldier or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about the Winter Soldier. I didn't know it to the point where when we got to Captain America and the Winter Soldier, it took me a while to understand that they were saying that this had, you know what I mean? Like to crack what had happened. Their first lines of greetings are great.
I thought you were dead. I thought you were smaller.
And they head out, and as they're going, Bucky asks,
Did it hurt? A little. It's permanent. So far.
They're great together. I wish we had more Bucky and Steve. It's not a criticism of the movie because I don't think it would have fit, but I do really like them together. It's a lot of fun.
They're a great pair. I mean, and really, Bucky is the continuous theme through the Captain America trilogy. I mean, even Civil War, which it's not a ding, but people are like, well, it's Avengers 2.5. And it's like, sure, but the Steve-Bucky relationship is the thread that carries over all three movies.
And we're heading out through the factory that is now exploding, and there's fire everywhere and all sorts of stuff going on. And then we run into Johann Schmidt.
Captain America! How exciting! I am a great fan of your films.
Let me throw something in real quick, Steve.
Remember,
in Inglourious Bastards, you have future MCU villain Zemo in there.
Daniel Bruhl. Yeah.
Doing what was the Pride of Our Nation or whatever?
Stoller, Private Stoller.
Private Stoller. So, I mean, it's kind of funny how both sides have their propaganda. Yet one is considered, better or good versus it's all point of view, isn't it? And so you see here, I mean, the fact that he mentions Captain America's movies, that's immediately what they essentially were doing for the Nazis when they were doing those films there to kind of prove Leni Riefenstahl, all that kind of stuff. That's essentially propaganda. So, I mean, it's propaganda. The same tactics work no matter what side of the fence you're on, So the fact that he references them, I think, are really great.
It's just the weapons of war. And if we look at some of the propaganda that we made back in the day, including like Looney Tunes cartoons, it is some racist, messed up, I'm not saying that it's, Triumph of the Will, Leni Riefenstahl kind of thing, but it ain't that good.
That's why I like Kenneth Choi's exchange, because they're not going to harp on the fact that there were Japanese internment camps as Captain America First Avenger, but that exchange is an essential allusion to that, to say, like, from Fresno, you idiot. Yeah, it's basically that.
Well, and, as we learned from like the Karate Kid, that the Japanese unit was the most decorated unit in fighting in World War II for the Americans.
What a surprise.
And we also see as they're talking that that skin on Skull's face is not 100% perfect at this moment, which I think is a great little touch. And then he punches Cap's shield, denting it. And this is the first big, like, oh, wow. And they start to fight, and we think, oh my God, this is going to be the big fight. And then Zola hits a switch and retracts the walkway that they're on. And so essentially ending the fight. Apparently there's a deleted scene where Schmidt yells at Zola for doing this.
I mean,
Don't you throw that towel.
Yeah.
The backdrop of, the factory on fire, and you have that great silhouette of the two of them on that bridge. I mean, yeah, this is like an Act 3 setting for a fight.
Totally.
But the moment that the bridge retracts, I mean, again, very cool shot.
No matter what lies Erskine told you see, I was his greatest success.
And he pulls off that mask, revealing the Red Skull. Which I think they did an amazing job with.
Yeah. Oh, the makeup on that is so cool. Like it is very comics accurate, but it still looks somewhat realistic. Like you have the pronounced brow, you have the pronounced cheekbones. It is funny that it did look like Hugo Weaving had a little bit of a struggle getting that mask off, because you can see, I feel like it maybe takes a little bit longer than they would have preferred. And also there's a piece in the back,
right,
which we don't see, but clearly was bothering Hugo Weaving because he rips that off as well.
So apparently this is how the character of the Red Skull came about, which is Joe Simon wanted to create a really good villain for Captain America, and he is sitting eating an ice cream sundae, as you do, and there's hot fudge on the ice cream sundae, and he goes, oh, maybe some kind of a giant tentacled dark monster is going to be the big villain. And then he continues eating his ice cream sundae and looks from the hot fudge to the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae and goes, no, I have a better idea.
Oh, wow.
So the Red Skull comes from the cherry on top of an ice cream sundae.
That's brilliant.
Needless to say, this is a big makeup job. It's 3.5 hours to put him in this. And one of the things I found interesting in researching this is that normally latex is the main material you use to make these kinds of masks. This isn't made out of latex. It's made out of silicone. And it gives it that weird sort of glow. It has a very, very different texture from masks that we're used to looking at. And then in addition to the actual physical mask, then they did CG to improve it. One thing is they had to get rid of Hugo Weaving's nose. So that's CG. But they also, made the jaw more square. They lowered the lips so that the teeth are more pronounced. They did a bunch of little things to make it more extreme. And like I said, I think it looks great.
You are deluded, Captain. You pretend to be a simple soldier, but in reality, you are just afraid to admit that we have left humanity behind. And like you, I embrace it proudly, without fear.
And a great Cap line in response to that.
Then how come you're running?
And then Zola and the Skull head to the roof where there's some sort of gyrocopter thing, which only seats one. Zola's like, well, how am I going to get out? Because... And he hands him the keys to the car and says, not a scratch, doctor, not a scratch. And Steve and Bucky are trying to get out. They see like a beam across this fiery chasm, and Bucky has to go across it shaking, which seems pretty darn scary to me. And finally, he makes it to the other side, just as the beam, of course, collapses, and Steve bends the steel railing, which I think maybe is the first time that Bucky sees just how damn strong he is.
Yeah.
And then he runs and jumps, and in the midst of jumping across this chasm and explosions everywhere, we dissolve to a typewriter.
Senator Brandt, I regret to report that Captain Stephen G. Rogers went missing behind enemy lines on the 3rd. Aerial reconnaissance has proven unfruitful. As a result, I must declare Captain Rogers killed in action.
By the way, those are the softest hands I've ever seen typing on a typewriter. I was looking at that today. I mean, like, this guy hasn't seen 1 second of war. He's like Jeremy, whatever his name is, in Saving Private Ryan. He hasn't seen a second of war. He's just been sitting in the HQ the whole time.
This is one of the moments in the movie that it's like, I wonder if they had something a little more grand planned. Because that shot of him with the explosion, it leaves it leaves a little something to be desired. Like, you think there's going to be one extra beat. I mean, in the transition into the typewriter, like, that does make sense. But it's like, it is kind of a strange shot. You do kind of feel like, I wonder if there was something bigger planned initially.
I think it's a weird thing too. For me, like, the thing that's missing, I think the thing, I said before, like, this movie goes downhill a bit. Not that I don't like it in the second half, but I like it less. And I'm starting to figure out what some of it is. I feel like one of the things that's really weaker is the Bucky Cap relationship. Is that we don't see that much of it. Like, it's so great when they establish it in those first few scenes, is that Bucky doesn't have do you know how I said that Cap doesn't have the discovery as much as I would like him to when he first gets his power?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bucky doesn't have that much. He just sees Cap, and there's kind of a joke or two about, you're a giant now and have superpowers.
Right.
But that's it. Like, we don't really see their friendship that much,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's why they took the cue from that. And maybe they thought, well, we've got bigger plans for him.
Right.
So let's, just kind of do the broad brushstrokes here in the second half of the movie with him.
I can't touch Stark. He's rich. And he's the Army's #1 weapons contractor. You are neither one.
With respect, sir, I don't regret my actions. And I don't think Captain Rogers did either.
What makes you think I give a damn about your opinions? I took a chance with you, Agent Carter, and now America's golden boy and a lot of other good men are dead because you had a crush.
It wasn't that. I had faith.
But coming around, when he hears the commotion and he's walking down, he's almost like a mini Patton walking down with that helmet on. And the timing of it, to see them coming over the hill just as the soldiers come apart, is just brilliant. And that's the kind of hero moment, the old school America moment that you remember from films in the past, And so it's just like, it's great that he was able to capture that through this whole sequence.
Agreed. I do think there is, into that whole section, it's not as smooth as it should be, or like there is a choppiness to it that does take some of the resonance out of that moment. Still, it's a great moment. Like, you get to see, Haley Atwell has some really nice moments, and then like getting to see all the guys sort of returning with Steve Rogers at the head of that group. Something that I did find funny, which I hadn't really paid attention to before, but they've got that Hydra vehicle, like that tank, and there are several guys riding on it, and then who look fine, like uninjured, but then there are a bunch of guys who are being held up by other dudes. I'm like, maybe you should have put them on the vehicle.
Yeah, good point.
Some of these men need medical attention. I'd like to surrender myself for disciplinary action.
That won't be necessary.
He won him over. He took some initiative. And that's what military men like to see. He took some initiative, went out there, got the soldiers, saved everybody. By the way, that was a lot of people. So I don't know how many people were in that facility before it blew up, but I'm glad all those got out. And they, they got there. And he turned himself in for disciplinary measures. So he was respectful of the colonel. And for those of you who know the military, you don't salute and then put it down until the superior officer salutes back. So that was a little bit of a mistake there. But like, he doesn't salute him. Colonel Phillips doesn't. And then in the end, now he's won him over.
I do like this moment a lot. I think seeing, and Colonel Phillips's switch and Peggy's relief, and really the guys who are booing and heckling Cap before, rallying around him now.
Let's hear it for Captain America!
And then we go to an award ceremony where maybe it's in Washington, D.C. or something, and Senator Brandt is there and about to give Captain America a big award, and he says,
"To my personal friend, Captain America."
Nothing. And he repeats it, and then a guy comes out and whispers something in his ear. And of course, we know that Cap's off fighting the war. And we cut to a guy who's dressed up like a general in the audience who says,
"I thought he'd be taller."
That is your Stan Lee cameo for the day.
Yeah,
I really do think this is one of the better Stan Lee cameos. I mean, because it was so unexpected. In terms of the senator's staff, like, someone has really dropped the ball. The fact that Steve is still in Europe. And he's expecting him to be behind that curtain.
That person definitely did not do proper prep.
Right.
we're down now having a meeting, and now Colonel Phillips, who'd been dismissive of Steve this whole movie, says,
We are going to set a fire under Johann Schmidt's ass. What do you say, Rogers? It's your map. You think you can wipe Hydra off of it?
Yes, sir. I'll need a team.
We're already putting together the best men.
With all due respect, sir, so am I.
So now he's all in on Steve. And even when they thought he was gone, he was like, your golden boy, you did this, you risked this or that. So he certainly knew the value of the project and of the operation. And now that he's back, he's very much on board with Steve and helping him complete these missions to wipe Hydra off the mech, because now he's proven himself in battle. So,
yeah, he's proven Colonel Phillips wrong that that one man can make a difference. One man is responsible for what just happened, and that man is Steve Rogers. I mean, if Gilmore Hodge had been the one who had taken the serum, would he have done this?
Yeah.
Probably not. But I think that's the moment where, again, I think obviously we disagreed with Steve about like the dismissiveness of Colonel Phillips, but I think it's that moment that he's kind of like, okay, you were right, I was wrong, let's move forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that reversal is key to the movie.
Sure.
John, you know what you just made me think of?
What's that?
Is you said, as you were talking about being in the military, and you said that soldiers should use their initiative. Mm-hmm. Do you know what line from my favorite movie suddenly popped into my head?
What's that?
In Lawrence of Arabia, Allenby says, is listing all the things that are wrong with Lawrence. And he says, well, aren't officers supposed to serving in the field, supposed to use their initiative at all times? And Allenby says, not really, Lawrence. It's very dangerous. And Lawrence says, I know. Well, you know that already. And what's interesting about the reason I think this is actually that's very much what's happening in this movie is the soldier goes out in the field, does something totally unexpected, creates this huge coup, and then the colonel or the general, in the case of Lawrence of Arabia, goes, okay, I'm going to give you more responsibility because you've proven yourself.
Right.
It's funny. Obviously this movie does not have the depth of Lawrence of Arabia, but it's interesting that it's dealing with similar themes.
Yeah.
So of course we know when he says, I'm putting together my own team, exactly who he's talking about. And we cut to some pub, and there he is with the guys who would be the Howling Commandos and Bucky, and trying to convince them, they just got out. Let's go back in.
Sounds rather fun, actually.
I love the characters of the we love to be soldiers team, You know what I mean? I didn't express it that well, but they don't take a lot of convincing,
No.
With Dugan, you just got to buy him a beer.
Yep.
And apparently he'll go back in. And the fun thing about this scene is when they do go back to that bar and there's a tiny little bartender who's just like, where are they putting all this stuff? That's Leander Dini. That is the scale double for Skinny Steve.
Oh,
that's great.
I did not know that. That's really great. And so Steve goes off to buy some beers for the team. And there is Bucky.
How about you? You ready to follow Captain America into the jaws of death?
Hell no. That little guy from Brooklyn, who was too dumb not to run away from a fight. I'm following him.
That's great. Yeah. Good little moment.
But not enough for you, Steve.
I'll tell you exactly what, because I just figured it out.
Yeah.
So let me wait just a minute and I'll tell you in a minute when we get there.
I think you and I are probably on the same page.
Okay. But that moment's really nice. And the guys all sort of burst in a song, and in walks Agent Carter in a red dress.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Did she put on that red dress on purpose?
Of course she put on the red dress. Do you know women at all? Of course she put on the red dress on purpose.
She put on the dress, did her hair, did her makeup for a 2-minute flyby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is commitment.
Well, it might have been more than a 2-minute flyby had Steve handled things slightly differently.
Well, yeah, it could have been Wonder Woman with Steve there, as we saw in the movie.
The music is going on, and Bucky says to Peggy,
You don't like music?
I do, actually.
And Bucky, still trying to get in there, says, then what are we waiting for?
Oh, yeah.
And she, without looking at Bucky at all, her eyes glued onto Steve Rogers' eyes, says,
The right partner.
Oh, great moment. And if you've ever been the third wheel in a conversation, this is this moment perfectly encapsulates. It's where you're trying to get in there, but it's like, nope, this ship has left the harbor.
Yeah.
I have been the third wheel many, many times.
Yeah, I mean, this was perfect. This was great. And it reaffirmed this division between him and Bucky, because Bucky's like, after she just walks away, Bucky's like, I'm invisible. This is like a whole nother timeline. So, like, what's going on?
No, he says, I feel like you.
I feel like you. Yeah, that's true. That's what he said. I don't know what's happening here.
Howard Stark is experimenting on some little glowy thing that got pulled out of the factory from Schmidt. And he's like, I don't see what the big deal with this thing is. And he's got his robot arms touching it. And suddenly it explodes, drives him across the room. And the first thing he says is,
write that down.
Which is great.
That is a great stunt. Like, that's probably a ratchet pull. That's like you have a stunt man in a harness, there's a cable attached, and when they call action, there's a crank that yanks them back. But I mean, that is such a good, the impact of that explosion, it looks very, very real.
Steve shows up in what's like obviously the office of Colonel Phillips and asks to see him, and the woman there who is reading a paper that says 400 prisoners liberated at first is saying, well, you got to wait, and then looks up and realizes who it is.
Of course, you're welcome to wait.
I think she plays this beautifully.
Yeah, Natalie Dormer. Yeah.
From Game of Thrones and the Hunger Games. This is another role that I feel like there was probably some left on the cutting room floor, because there's a shot of her before this.
Yes.
Where she is next to Tommy Lee Jones, and she sort of hands him a file or something and kind of rolls her eyes. So it's such a specific choice that it seems like something came before this. Like that would be my guess, because otherwise, I don't know, like just from a director's perspective, it's like, what are you doing? Like, don't roll your eyes. Don't roll your eyes at the Colonel.
Yeah.
It's so funny because now I'm thinking about, from an editor's perspective, those are the things that drive you nuts. Is that you go, I have this remnant of this other beat that I took out the beat, but I need this shot for another reason, and I can't get rid of the eye roll.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes every time you see the scene, that's all you see.
Right.
But I didn't pick it up. I'm glad you picked it up, Shannon.
John did too, I think.
Yeah. I always spot extras or actors doing too much in moments. It drives me insane. Lindley will tell you tales and tales of me pausing TV shows or movies where I go, look at that extra, or look at that actor doing that extra. You don't need to do that extra shit. You're taking attention away from the central point of the scene. So I get it.
There is, as I know the Cine-Files will do little digressions from here and then. There is a moment in Spider-Man 2002 where it is the Flash Peter Parker fight, and there's this one background performer who went on to do he was background on Chuck. Like, he was there for whenever they were working in their Best Buy like store, but he's a chubbier guy. He's got glasses. At some point during the scene, whoever, I believe it's the second AD who was in charge of the background performers, he got a note, because at some point, in some shots, he's kind of cheering Peter on, like, yeah, get him. And then there are other shots where he's just in awe, like, oh, I can't believe what we're seeing right now. Yeah. And that's not something like every moviegoer is going to notice. But that was something I noticed the first time I saw that movie in the theaters. I'm like, what's with this kid in the background? Pick a lane.
So now I'm going to continue the digression a little. I remember, so Karen, as you know, loves to sing, and she's been in a lot of choirs and in choruses. And what she's talked about is like, the job of the soloist is different from the job of the person in the chorus. Is the job of the person in the chorus is to blend perfectly with the other people in the chorus to create the right sound to support the soloist. Is that you're not supposed to, and it's really, that's the job of an extra, is you're supposed to be you're not supposed to stand out.
Right.
You're supposed to be at the level and be in the scene.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Your accoutrement.
Now, this this woman who's approaching Steve Rogers, she is trying to stand out.
Yeah, well,
and I love her tactic. I mean, first of all, we all know what her intentions are. They're very clear.
You're a hero.
Well, that depends on the definition.
The
Really.
women of America, they owe you their thanks. And seeing as they're not here.
Does everybody watching this know that Peggy's about to walk up?
Of course.
Captain, we're ready for you, if you're not otherwise occupied.
Oh, no. She didn't just move in for the kiss. They were kissing for a few seconds.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm going to make that clear because that is an odd beat. Because I get that Steve's awkward, but he still has, with women rather, but he still has feelings for Peggy. So it's odd that the good old American Steve wouldn't come to the forefront in that moment and keep him from kissing her or saying something like, oh, you know, that's not my thing or whatever. But he indulges in the kiss for a few seconds. So him coming after Agent Carter trying to be like, it's not what you think is absolute horseshit. He was indulging in it for sure. So
well, don't you think there's an element of shock?
He ain't above his foibles. Let me just put that out.
I feel like he's a little in shock. Like this has never happened before. That I mean, maybe this is his first kiss. We don't know.
So you're telling me the one thing he can do with his powers that he's shocked by is get kissed by a woman. Everything else, he doesn't have a moment where he's like, "Whoa, I can do this." Come on.
I think Skinny Steve has developed no defenses against women whatsoever.
Clearly. Yeah.
I don't think he has any idea what I think he is a full deer in the headlights in this moment. And John, as you said, I mean, and titillated, like, you know.
Yes.
Like,
of course.
Now, on the other hand, though, here's what I don't find believable. Are you telling me that none of those chorus girls that he toured the U.S. with in the USO show didn't make any moves on Steve Rogers?
Yeah.
True. I would think that I've toured with actors and singers and dancers a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that goes on backstage. But needless to say, Agent Carter is not pleased.
Looks like finding a partner wasn't that hard after all.
Peggy, that's not what you thought it was.
I don't think anything, Captain, not one thing. You always wanted to be a soldier, and now you are, just like all the rest.
That is rough.
Yeah, she got that British stiff upper lip, man.
Yeah, it's a really rough moment, and his comeback is weak.
But what about you and Stark? How do I know you two haven't been fondueing?
Now, does he actually have no idea what the word fondue means?
He clearly doesn't. Yeah. He clearly doesn't. I mean, I think all of John's points that he made about Steve's foibles are perfectly valid until he tries to use fondue as a verb talking about carnal relations.
Fondue's just cheese and bread, my friend.
Really? I didn't think...
Nor should you, pal. The moment you think you know what's going on in a woman's head is the moment your goose is well and truly cooked.
Not wrong.
And a great line. Full and truly cooked is a great, yeah. And right now, we get to, basically, Howard Stark is now going to be Q.
I hear you're kind of attached.
It's handier than you might think.
I took the liberty of coming up with some options.
The electric shield and, magnetic shields. And Steve notices that underneath on the shelf, just sort of casually, almost misplaced down there, is this shiny round shield.
What about this one?
No, that's just a prototype.
What's it made of?
Vibranium.
And I love that as he picks up the shield, it makes that sound.
This is something that I think the MCU has done so well. And it's mainly for people that have read comics all their lives, is you get to hear the sounds that in a comic book you would read a word. Like Wolverine's claws coming out, like the snicked. Getting to hear what Cap's shield sounds like. Same thing like with Mjolnir, same thing anytime Iron Man uses his repulsors. Yeah. Their sound design on all of their sort of legacy characters has been so good.
Here's what's weird about this, because then we go on to describe no, that's a prototype, that's the rarest metal on Earth. And he goes, well, why don't you make more of these? And it's like, that's all there is. And it's like, okay, so they took all the vibranium they had in the United States. They, for some reason, shaped it into the shape of a shield.
Yeah.
Brought it to Europe, put it on the bottom shelf, just kind of sitting there casually, like this stuff is worth millions of dollars. And that wasn't even what he was showing to Cap. He wasn't even going to show him that shield.
Yeah.
that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But still, it is the moment, this is Excalibur. This is the moment of him coming together with the great weapon, his great symbol. And as he picks it up, Peggy approaches.
What do you think?
She immediately, without hesitation, grabs a gun.
Yes, I think it works.
I mean, it's a prototype. What if it hadn't worked?
Yeah. He just kissed another girl. I don't think he deserves 3 bullets at him with a shield. I mean, it seems a bit of an extreme reaction from Agent Carter, but I mean, I think this is why people think she's such a badass. She's got no qualms, risking things in certain moments. And certainly if the prototype hadn't worked, it would have been a bad situation because didn't the Colonel Phillips accuse her of using a crush to inspire
crush, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Captain America? So I mean, what would be her defense in this moment? I wonder, because it is absolutely because her crush was kind of it's jealous, and she got jealous over her crush. Yeah,
it's not just that the prototype works; it's that Steve's reflexes actually lift up the shield.
Yes,
and he isn't going, Peggy's not going to shoot me, is she?
What do you do? Because that is a low ceiling where they are.
That's true.
What do you do if the bullets ricochet?
Yeah, it could have absolutely hit Stark. Yeah. But great moment because they both come together looking at her like you could almost hear the 1940s music cue. Something like that. And then they cut to whatever they cut to next.
I had some ideas about the uniform.
Whatever you want, pal.
Cut to him putting the shotgun into his holster, and we see we're gearing up to go off on missions in a classic superhero sense.
This is where I think the movie does take a little bit of a dip. I think the montage doesn't necessarily serve it entirely. Like, it's awesome getting to see Cap and the Howling Commandos do all this action. Like, it's really, really great. It's just from a story perspective, it's just not that exciting. Like, it's cool looking, but I do agree with Steve. Like, there are maybe moments here where we could have strengthened that Bucky-Cap relationship.
So, yes, we are on the same page exactly.
Okay.
Shannon. That is exactly what I was going to say. I think it's a perfectly good montage. The action sequences are well choreographed. They're fun. They're not as spectacular as maybe some later on in Marvel movies are going to be, but they're good. But if instead they had Cap with Bucky as his partner and them talking and planning and seeing not only their friendship, but the heroism, how they work together, Bucky's intelligence, and you develop and you go, this is my right-hand man. I couldn't do any of this without you.
Right.
Then his death would have a lot more power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand that. I think they just, it's called Captain America, not Captain America and Bucky. So I think in their minds they were thinking, well, let's just focus on Cap and let's have him be the central guy, blah blah blah, and then down the road, if things work out, we'll have stuff for Sebastian Stan. So, but you guys make a good point. It would have worked certainly to give more depth to the death when it happens, because although the death is moving, just as the last death is moving or supposed death is moving. It doesn't have quite the same weight, because of how it all goes about. We're right, Stephen, Shannon. We don't have the moments with them extended through the montage so that when the death happens, it's even more shocking, right? Mm-hmm. So, I hear you. I mean, I understand the logic that they were going with, but I think you guys make excellent points.
And during the middle of this montage where we see Steve and the guys out fighting, there's actually newsreel footage of them. And Peggy and Colonel Phillips are watching the newsreel footage. And as Steve pulls out his compass and opens it up, what's on the inside of the compass?
Oh, little cutout picture of Peggy.
Yeah.
Where did he get that from?
I was wondering that too.
Well, there are a lot of open windows, I guess. In the facility, I don't know.
You are failing! We are close to an offensive that will shake the planet. Yet we are continually delayed because you cannot outwit a simpleton with a shield.
This is hardly my area of expertise. I merely developed the weapons. I cannot fire them.
This is fascinating too, isn't it? Because it's like, well, why isn't Schmidt able to inspire the soldiers to fight? And it's because he's a hateful person, and so people aren't going to give that extra commitment or dedication to fight at the same level that they are for Captain America. He inspires them.
Yeah.
And so there's the difference. So the problem isn't that there isn't Zola or the soldiers, especially that moment is like, we fought to the last man is apparently not
Another think take.
Exactly. It's because Schmidt is a dick, and so they're not going to follow a dick. And let this be a lesson to everybody. Most of the time, people don't follow dicks unless they're getting something out of it, I suppose. But yeah, it just is fascinating to watch this happen here.
First of all, so many jokes that I'm not going to say. Yeah. Second of all, I'm sure both of you at one point or another have had the boss when things went wrong. They felt that the problem was they hadn't sufficiently yelled at you.
Yes. Motivated you enough.
Yeah. Like, obviously you haven't understood. Like, no, I haven't come up with a new strategy or any better ways to do anything or any plans. I just feel like things aren't working. It's obviously your fault. I'll yell at you.
Yeah.
And this is my brief digression, is that normally it's the boss. The boss is the person who has to figure out how to make it work better.
Yeah.
It's Schmidt's job to figure out how to stop Captain America, particularly because he also has superpowers.
Right.
What the fuck have you been doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're on this snowy mountaintop. We've decoded a Hydra message that says that Zola is going to be on this train. And so they're going to have to slide down on this zip line with a 10-second window to land on top of the speeding train.
Yeah.
The thing that I think about this is like, Cap has superpowers.
Yeah.
The other guys don't. This seems like, and I was going like, why is Cap the only guy with a helmet? The guy who's like the most durable. He seems to be asking a lot of these other guys.
Well, you can't put the helmet over the bowler. So, it's just kind of
fair. I always wonder if it's like a steel line bowler, by the way.
Yeah, right. Oh, so ridiculous.
It could be like an odd job weapon.
That's actually what I was thinking. Like that sequence hit the cutting room floor is when Dum Dum Dugan decapitates a guy with his bowler.
Dum Dum killed a guy. Oh, that's good.
Well, and it's funny, like you said, John, in the last part, I would have loved more of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It would have been a lot of fun.
Should have been serious.
But they slide down, they land on the train, they go into the train, we fight through a bunch of guys. By the way, I think this whole thing was a reshoot. That they did it in a narrower train car, and then they didn't like the choreography. I don't know, but I feel like I think that they reshot this. Cap comes through and blocks one of the big Hydra weapons with the shield, and then loses the shield. And Bucky picks up the shield, holds it up, and the Hydra weapon hits him, knocks him through the hole in the train car. Steve wins, comes outside, and there is Bucky hanging from the train. They're reaching for him, trying to grab him, and Bucky falls, we think, to his death.
So this one moment, I do feel like they really dropped the ball. In the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated series, and John has heard me talk about this before, but it came out in around 2010. But in their Captain America episode, which was in black and white, it was like sort of, it was a flashback to watching Cap in World War II fight the Red Skull. Their Bucky is a kid. Mm-hmm. But what happens, and this always makes me emotional. I'm going to try to lock it up here. But what happens in their sequence is the Red Skull is in some sort of plane rocket ship thing. Cap has climbed on. The plane is going to DC. Cap looks and he sees Bucky is behind him. And granted, Bucky's a kid here. Mm-hmm. But at one point, Bucky slips and Cap catches him. And it becomes that choice of, do I stop the villain or do I save my friend? Right. And it's Bucky's choice. Bucky says, here we go. He says, the world needs you more than me. And Bucky lets go.
Damn.
And that would have been a stronger sequence because, I mean, you've got all the pieces set up there that he's hanging on to this, blown outside of a train. It looks like they're both going to fall and Bucky chooses to let go. And the following scene, which I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the moment where Peggy says, this was Bucky's choice. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really like he fell. If you actually had him actively sacrifice himself for his friend because he knows his friend is going to be the one to be able to save the world, I think that moment lands a lot harder and it strengthens that Steve-Bucky relationship.
It's way better.
Yeah.
That is because now I'm picturing like Steve is reaching for him. He's almost about to get him. And you cut to Zola is getting away.
Yeah.
Like Zola is got some secret way to get away. And Steve sees it and makes the choice, no, I'm going to save my friend. And Bucky goes like that and let's go.
Yeah.
And then I can picture Chris Evans is looking, like, oh my God, my friend just died, that reaction, and then turning towards Zola and the anger on his face and charging. Because one of the other things I think is weird about the sequence is it's not Steve Rogers that grabs Zola, it's another guy. And it's kind of anticlimactic, and it's like, but if you had Bucky just died and he turns and fights through 20 guys of Hydra brutally and grabs Zola, that would be like a hell of a moment. And you're totally right too. The scene with Peggy has way more force later on.
Yeah. These are great points. These are great points.
I'm on Team Shannon on this one 100%.
Well, again, I can't take credit for that idea. Again, like the animated series is the one that did this, and I feel like a lot of the comics.
Yeah, but you told me about it.
Yeah, so
okay. You know what? I'm taking the credit.
Take the credit.
We're in London. Zola's been captured. This is like one of those scenes of like, here are two really good actors having a really good time playing this scene. Oh, yeah. He's in like a prison cell, nervous. He sees some blood. In walks Colonel Phillips with a tray of food with a nice steak and potato dinner.
What is this?
Steak.
What is in it?
Cow.
And Zola doesn't want it because he doesn't eat meat. It disagrees with him. And Phillips says,
how about cyanide? Does that give you the rumbly tummy too?
the Tommy Lee Jones take the rumbly tummy.
Tommy Lee Jones takes the steak and starts eating it.
Given the valuable information he has provided, and in exchange for his full cooperation, Dr. Zola is being remanded to Switzerland?
I sent that message to Washington this morning. Of course, it was encoded. You guys haven't broken those codes, have you?
It's a great little trap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, as you pointed out, Steve, I mean, these are two really, really talented actors just having a good time. And the visual, again, this would have been a 1940s thing, but I don't know how many of your listeners have ever had steak with a glass of milk. What?
Well, that would not be kosher. So
nice.
No, I don't keep kosher.
Talk about the rumbly tumblies. Yeah.
And basically, he's like, look, Schmidt's going to come to kill you regardless. You can no longer be trusted, so you might as well help us.
Which isn't flawed logic, Steve. It is not flawed logic.
No, absolutely.
This guy's a madman.
Schmidt believes he walks in the footsteps of the gods. Only the world itself will satisfy him.
You do realize that's nuts, don't you?
The sanity of the plan is of no consequence.
Then why is that?
Because he can do it.
I think that's a great line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we cut to the first full image we see of that Hydra flying wing, and the skull is there. And this is like basically the to evil scene,
The black and white. I mean, this is 100% no redemptive qualities. He is a bad guy.
Yeah.
Well, and the Hydra guys, they're like stormtroopers. You know what I mean? They have no characters. They're just a mindless group of people that support the bad guy.
Right.
And by the way, they're also a whole bunch of digital copies because they only had like 20 Hydra guys, and then they just duplicated them over and over again. This is the scene we were talking about before. Is Steve is in the ruins of some bombed out building, and Peggy comes find him, and Steve is trying to get drunk, and the super soldier serum, it won't even let him get drunk.
Yeah.
I've decided not to take the super soldier serum now. I was going to.
That's what did it, huh?
That's what did it. Like, not ever?
It wasn't your fault.
Did you read the report?
Yes.
Then you know that's not true.
Did you believe in your friend? Did you respect him? Then stop blaming yourself. Allow Barnes the dignity of his choice.
Yep, I'm back to the Shannon McClung plan here. the plagiarized Shannon McClung plan. So now we're in this big meeting. This scene apparently was all shot in one shot. And the problem with shooting everything in one shot is you can't cut anything out. And so they went, and this is why I am, as a director, I really suck at this because I think like an editor. And so so I can always adjust the timing of everything in post. When you shoot everything in one shot, the timing has to be right on.
Yeah.
It has to be perfect. And I'm not, and the camera always has to be in the right place. So I'm not good at that. But they got into post and they went, this scene is way too long and there's a whole bunch of lines we don't need. And so then they took their everything in one shot and cut it up into little pieces. And then the lines didn't quite work, so they ADR'd different words into people's mouths to make the whole scene kind of make sense.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot of work in post messing around with stuff.
It is a lot of work in post.
And what we basically hear is that Schmidt's plan is to wipe out the entire eastern seaboard in the next 24 hours. It'll take him an hour to do it.
Wow.
And that they're at their one last base, which is in the Swiss Alps underneath the surface and really hard to attack.
So what are we supposed to do? It's not like we can just knock on the front door.
Why not? That's exactly what we're going to do.
I think this is a fun sequence, but I don't think Steve's plan makes a whole lot of sense.
No. I mean, the whole idea that, all right, I'm going to get myself captured, and everyone is going to be so distracted by the fact that they have me, you're going to be able to zip line in right to Schmidt's office.
Right.
It's a little convenient.
Well, and if you can just zip line into Schmidt's office, why didn't Steve just zip line into Schmidt's office? You know?
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point.
But the sequence of him riding his motorcycle through these guys and taking out group after group, which kind of, by the way, reminds me of another film the three of us have talked about, which is Last Crusade. You know,
right.
I think it's a really fun sequence. I like him. You know, he pulls the pin out of a grenade. He, you know, all the stuff he does to get in, turns his motorcycle into essentially a bomb to hit the door. It's all really fun, actiony stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like when he is off the motorcycle and he's taking on all the guys, you know, kind of 1 versus 20. This is when we really get to see him start ricocheting the shield off of stuff, which is, you know, for an action lover, it's just super cool.
Yeah. It is. And by the way, there were many different shields they built. So they built a metal shield. They built a rubber shield, which is what he's using when he's actually hitting people with it. They built a magnetic shield. So what that's for is when he puts it on his back, it'll stick to his back. But then they also have like a soft shield that's more comfortable when he wears it on his back for a long time. But then for all the ricocheting, do you know what kind of shield they used?
No.
Digital.
Yeah, no shield. No shield. He's just miming it. And they're adding it later, which is Chris Evans had to come up with ways to mime throwing and catching the shield, and he does a great job, I think.
Yeah, I mean the moment where, and I think it's during the montage actually, but the moment where he throws the shield and the shield's kind of coming to camera, it's like the great 3D movie shot. I mean, they use that shot during the credits of Avengers Endgame. I mean, this was 8 years later, and they still hadn't come up with like that was such a great, awesome Cap shield moment. Like that's one of his closing moments in the credits.
Yeah. And by the way, something Joe Johnston apparently learned when he did The Rocketeer was to have fight choreography be part of the audition process.
Ooh.
So the actor had to learn fight choreography in order to get this gig.
Well, it's like Michael Bay. Michael Bay says, well, to a degree, I'm going to make the connection. Michael Bay makes it very clear that if you're going to be cast in a Michael Bay film, you better be at the top of your endurance, because he likes his actors to be the ones running throughout the whole film. So when he does an action sequence, he's like pretty much there's no stunts. You're running, and so he's very clear about that with casting. So I appreciate that. Ben Affleck talked about it all. He was like, I was kind of out of shape when I took Armageddon, though we don't do a lot of running. I had to get in shape in order to be able to do that kind of stuff. So,
and in the end of the sequence, he's surrounded by guys with double flamethrowers, and then all the rest of Hydra is surrounded. He's captured. They bring him in.
Arrogance may not be a uniquely American trait, but I must say you do it better than anyone.
And they talk about Erskine.
He resented my genius and tried to deny me what was rightfully mine. But he gave you everything. So, what made you so special?
Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
These lines would be corny if Chris Evans didn't deliver them so well.
Yes. And Schmidt gets so pissed he punches him because he's like, the fact that an ordinary person can become superhuman or superhero insults him, insults his intelligence, and so he lashes out in anger and jealousy and frustration.
And what does Cap say after taking a couple of superpowered punches from Schmidt?
I can do this all day.
Yes, but I don't have the time for you to do this all day.
So he pulls out his gun and is about to shoot Cap. And then just as this is happening, this is when the zip lines hit and in comes the howling commandos. And that is when Schmidt runs off. And then what we see is that Colonel Phillips and Agent Carter with the whole army are waiting outside and they launch their attack. Yeah. Which, by the way, I don't understand why the Hydra soldiers are standing in front of the wall. It seems like they don't understand the technology of a wall. Walls only work if you stand behind them.
This is like the big Act 3 sequence where you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but it's like, wow, you have superior weapons and the high ground. I mean, we learned from episode 3, like that's all you need. Right. All they would have to do is stand on top of that wall and just pick those soldiers off, but then we don't have the fun, exciting sequence of the good guys winning.
Yeah. Well, and what we heard before basically was it's impossible to frontal assault this place, which is pretty much exactly. I mean, what we don't see like our guys inside take out the defenses that allow the people in the front to get in. We don't see that.
Right.
What we do see is Steve chasing the Red Skull through these hallways. He throws his shield in order to stop a door from closing, and then Peggy shows up.
You're late.
And there's a long look between them, a romantic moment, and then...
Weren't you about to...
Right.
And he grabs his shield, heads off after the Skull, who's gotten into the flying wing. Cap runs through this airplane hangar, taking out guys as he goes. A lot of this is digital, but fun. And he is running after the plane, and he is not going to catch the plane. So it's a good thing that Colonel Phillips and Peggy pull up in that cool Hydra car.
And proceed down the longest runway in history before we get to that Fast and Furious movie where they have an even longer runway.
Yeah. And they're chasing after him. And I like that he hits, the superpower rocket button and flames shoot out of the car. All fun. He leans in and has one last kiss with Peggy.
Go get him.
And Philip says,
I'm not kissing you.
Such a great line.
I mean, the moment, because I feel like going back to that original screening that John and I got to go to, that moment where Peggy says, go get him. It's like, even though like there weren't a ton of people in that audience, like it was so empowering. Like, go get him, Cap. And then you have that great comic button with crusty old Tommy Lee Jones. Well, I'm not kissing you.
I wonder, does Marvel have a punch-up guy that goes through and just adds one-liners?
Certainly.
Oh, what? I think they have. I think they probably have a staff of punch-up people who go in and add one-liners. My guess is that could have been a Joss Whedon joke.
Totally.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, because it is one of the things that Marvel, when they're doing well, does so great, which is you can be emotionally involved in the story, but those jokes keep coming, Mm-hmm. And they manage to hit the right tone of not too jokey that it takes you out of it.
Yeah.
But fun and in the moment.
See, I think the one, because I mean, obviously they don't have a perfect record, but I feel like the one Avengers movie where the jokes come a little too fast and furious is part 2.
Yeah,
there are so many stake-sucking moments. Like, you've got Sokovia. It's flying in the air, but then Hawkeye and Black Widow are quipping about what to do with like the living room at Hawkeye's place, and it's like I wonder. Because Joss Whedon had such a documentedly like terrible time making that movie, I'm like, is that why the writing, especially those one-liners, why they were kind of so crappy? Is because the experience overall, like he just had it was just a really difficult time making that movie.
But also, it's like it's believing your own press as well, is where you think, oh, this is more jokes. This will be great. And then you don't understand how that can, like you said, take the stakes, really lower the stakes of the whole situation.
That is a really hard thing to get those jokes and get the tone just right.
Yeah,
is tough. And really, we see Marvel do it really, really well in a lot of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Steve is now inside the flying wing, and we have more hand-to-hand combat with guys. We see these big bombs with different American city names on them. One of the bombs drops out with one of the guys. It's totally Dr. Strangelove. Another guy gets it, and these bombs it's like a bomb plane thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a suicide job?
I mean, I didn't get the sense that those were bombs. I got the sense that they are just smaller aircrafts that will then carry the payload. But I mean, that probably, your theory probably makes more sense.
Yeah.
So this guy jumps into one of these bombs / planes, whatever it is, and Steve sees him, gets his shield, tries to open up the thing. Another guy jumps on top of Steve on top of the plane. He loses his shield. We drop out, and now we're on a fight on this small plane thing out in flying around. I really wonder about the thoughts of the Hydra guy who's on top of this thing fighting with a superpowered guy, just going like, I regret my choices. You know?
There's no way I make it out of this.
I mean, even if I win the fight, I'm still going to die.
Milk was a bad idea.
And his death is one of the more brutal, I think, in Marvel movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's the Raiders' death, the propeller.
Yeah, but we don't see the Raiders one. Yeah. This one, you see him fly into the propeller and become just a burst of, blood. Yeah. It's pretty nasty.
As much fun as this sequence is, I do feel like this is one they probably could have lost. That we just want to get Cap to fight Red Skull. Like, we just want that confrontation. And it's just funny that, he goes out on the little mini plane and ends up back in the big plane. It's just like, I was like, nah, let's just get to it.
Well, and this is the thing, is I'm not that emotionally involved. I'm enjoying the action sequences that are relatively well done.
Right.
But I don't feel a lot of emotional tension around this thing.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
You know what else? Going back to the Shannon McClung Bucky death plan, is that if it wasn't Zola, if it was the Red Skull, and he got away, then his anger towards Schmidt would be much higher in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're talking about the back half of the movie, and as we're talking about this now, because we're getting close to the end, it strikes me that not only did they kind of maybe didn't 100% reinforce the relationship between Bucky and Cap so that the death carries a little more weight, they also kind of sideline Schmidt as more than, because you've got the montage, you've got all this Captain America stuff, where folks, but we don't see him going into these towns and torturing people and killing people willy-nilly, women, men, and children, like old people. We don't see this building anger that we need to have as an audience, so that we're cheering for Cap even more to stop this monster. And I imagine that's a conscious choice, because they're trying to make this like a 1940s type movie where you don't really see too many unsettling things going on from the villain side of things in a World War II movie. But still, I think it's a modern audience. You've got to show them a little bit more. And Schmidt is kind of a forgotten villain by the time we get to this confrontation, so much so that it just devolves into them just fighting as a regular one-on-one type fight, where it could have been so much more, where, if I'm going to live to kill more people, that kind of thing, so that there's even a higher weight to it and bigger stakes to the fight. More than just stopping this guy, it's about all these people who have died that he is avenging in a way. And I think they could have carried a little more weight there if we'd had more time with him. So.
Yeah, I think there's probably a situation where that train sequence, that's Red Skull and Zola are both on that train. And Red Skull gets away, and Zola gets captured. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, John.
Because what we end up with is a hand-to-hand fight scene between these two guys. That again, I won't say that it's not well done. It is well done, particularly the moment where the shield goes into the controls and the plane starts going down. So they basically lose gravity and they fly up to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Which the way it was done, by the way, is they just redressed the floor to look like the ceiling, because the whole interior of the plane looks very similar, and so they're really just fighting on the same floor they were on before, and they're on wires. And he knocks the skull into the cube, which explodes with all this light. And Schmidt says, "What have you done?" And he reaches down and picks up the Tesseract, picks up an Infinity Stone,
which propels him through space. Nick Fury also does this in Avengers, and he's fine.
Yeah, weird, right?
But yeah, I mean, like at the time, like we all kind of figured Red Skull wasn't dead because of the fact, like, okay, this opened a hole in space, and this is before we knew the Tesseract was the Space Stone. But yeah, I mean, you do wonder how far ahead that they knew, because with Loki's scepter in Avengers, that fires like a blue blast as well. And then you kind of find out later, like, oh, did you not know that you were going to have the Mind Stone, a yellow stone in there?
Right.
Like if you had known that, those blasts probably would have been yellow. You would have thought.
Yeah.
I find this to be a totally unsatisfying ending for the Red Skull in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And Steve, I compare this to the end of Doctor Strange, which I like. I like that it's different, right? Because it's a battle between wills with him and Dormammu, and then he eventually wears him down and tricks him and gets him to do the things that he wants. With this, you set up this big fight, and then all of a sudden he's zapped out into space, and it's not from anything Steve did. So it's a little bit of a cop-out of an ending for sure, even though they do fix it later on in Infinity War and Endgame, which I think is great. I still think it's kind of an odd ending to eliminate one of the main, essentially the Joker to Captain America's Batman, or Batman's Captain America, whatever. You just eliminate him like that, and just as an odd decision, an odd way out.
Yeah, you think that maybe like there's a scenario where Cap throws his shield and that knocks Red Skull into this void. I mean, it's something active that Cap does to defeat the villain.
Oh yeah, it could work too. Yeah.
Well, and it's really no choice from either of them, because Cap doesn't do anything cool to make this moment happen.
Right.
And he doesn't pick up the stone for any particular reason. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's not like he goes, with this, I will finally defeat you because I'm going to use the power of you know what I mean? It's just, he just picks it up and looks at it.
Right.
And dies or disappears.
Yeah.
But needless to say, he is gone. The cube falls and then basically melts its way through the bottom of the plane. Steve gets on his controls, sees the plane's heading for New York City, and he cuts on his radio and calls and finds Peggy.
Captain Rogers, what is your...
Steve, is that you? Are you all right?
As unsatisfying as the Red Skull's defeat is, this moment quickly makes you forget it.
Give me your coordinates. I'll find you a safe landing site.
There's not going to be a safe landing.
And she's doing everything to stop this from happening.
Please don't do this. We have time. We can work it out.
Right now, I'm in the middle of nowhere. If I wait any longer, a lot of people are going to die. Peggy, this is my choice.
Every time I watch this ending, I always get tears in my eyes.
Yeah, agreed.
It's great because it's referencing Bucky. It's what is the first moment that she saw Steve, or not the first moment, but throwing himself on the grenade. This is who he is.
Yeah.
And now Steve looks down, picks up that picture that we saw earlier in the newsreel, and he puts it up and looks at it.
You're going to need a rain check on that dance.
All right. A week next Saturday at the Stork Club.
You got it.
Totally gets me, this scene. And I think the way that it ends is so brilliant and so painful because it's so subtle. He says, I still don't know how to dance.
I'll show you how. Just be there.
We'll have the band play something slow.
I'd hate to step on your...
I'm going to start crying. The repeated attempts where she's trying to get him back. Like, she knows, but she can't stop. Like, she has to keep trying to get him back. And like, you get that great little shot of Dominic Cooper in the background, and he slowly kind of gives her moment.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys notice this, but Phillips does as well. Phillips is back there and sends out the guy that was sitting there next to Peggy for a second, because he knows, like, let them have their time. So he respects, as much as he was bashing her about the crush or whatever, he does respect that there's real chemistry between them and real affection. And so if this is a soldier giving his life for his country to save the world, he deserves to have a one-on-one with his lady, So he respects it.
Part of me wonders why Steve can't bail out at the last minute, but
it's not in the script.
It's not in the script. But it's not. We got like 70 years. We got to get into the future, man.
Exactly, man.
This is not even where he's supposed to be.
It's got to make sure.
We see the plane slide under the ice, and then it's VE Day, and we see these celebrations, and our guys are toasting the captain. We see this kind of primitive robot arm grab this cube from underwater, and there's Howard, so we know that they recovered that. Phillips hands Peggy a classified folder that says inactive, and she starts to open it, and there's a long pause. This pause was really created in post between when she gets it and when we see the picture of Skinny Steve, which I think adds a lot of drama. And the last thing we see is a kid with a garbage can lid painted to look like Captain America's shield in New York. I think the montage is great. I have one comment about it. I would totally have played this entirely without dialogue and just music. I think all the dialogue's unnecessary. I think it would have played way more emotionally if it was just music.
I think it's not a bad choice. It would have been cool to see.
Is there a ton of dialogue though? Like I'm trying to remember.
We hear Howard talking about finding the cube, and we hear the toast to Cap. Like I don't need to hear them say to the captain. We could just see them toasting, and I would understand what was happening.
Gotcha.
It's black. There's a pause. We hear the sound of wind, and then we see Chris Evans open those beautiful eyes, and we hear the sound of a baseball game on the radio. And we see that he's sitting in this very 40s looking kind of hospital room-ish. And this woman who I think is perfectly phonally dressed as a period person.
It's Peggy. She's essentially a version of Peggy.
And it's just exactly slightly wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the hairstyle is like a modern version of someone trying to do a 40s hairstyle, not a 40s hairstyle.
Mm-hmm.
So that actress, her name is Amanda Rigetti. She was a regular on The Mentalist, which was a CBS procedural from a few years ago. She was a regular for several years. And I recurred on The Mentalist. So as she and the guy who played, they were both like federal agents, but the guy who played her boyfriend was an actor named Owen Yeoman, I believe. They were leaving the show right as I got on the show, but there was one episode where our paths kind of crossed. And not only... I think she had already done Captain America at this point. But Owen Yeoman was also, because he's a big, like 6'2", 6'3", like, really square jawed looking superhero guy. He also had a lot of brushes with being cast in Marvel and DC films. And he was actually telling me stories. Like there was one that he was offered Guardians of the Galaxy, a role in it. And he ultimately wasn't able to take it because the schedules conflicted with The Mentalist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Fuck. I'd be so mad.
That's brutal.
Yeah, it's bird in the hand. Bird in the hand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Or should I say afternoon?
Where am I?
You're in a recovery room in New York City.
And he gives her a very suspicious look and says,
Where am I really?
I like that they don't spend any time with this. You know what I mean? He sees through it immediately.
The game. It's from May 1941. I know because I was there.
And he stands up, and you see she's got a little panic button that she's hitting.
I'm going to ask you again. Where am I?
2 guards come in, and he knocks them through the walls of what is obviously a set. He runs out into the hall, into what's clearly a modern building, out into a modern city, and straight into the middle of Times Square. Sometimes the circle around Steadicam shot or tracking shot is overused. I think this is a great one.
And he's dressed in the same clothes he was wearing when he first became Captain America after the serum, right? He puts on the white shirt and runs after the guy. So he's wearing, I think, the khakis and the white shirt as well. And so it kind of fits perfectly with when we see him running through the streets of New York. And here he is running through the streets of New York again, except it's 70 years later.
I think it's a great moment. And as he's looking around and seeing all the crazy lights and screens of Times Square, we hear,
"Steady, soldier!"
And there is Nick Fury.
Look, I'm sorry about that little show back there, but we thought it best to break it to you slowly.
Break what?
You've been asleep, Cap, for almost 70 years.
Now, this scene was much longer, and you can watch the deleted scene. They had a whole conversation about stuff. And it's so much better that they cut it out.
Agreed.
You gonna be okay?
Yeah, I had a date.
Oh,
And if you have more in the scene, it takes away from that moment.
Yeah.
You know? By the way, I just heard Samuel L. Jackson interviewed. I think I was on Fresh Air. And what I didn't realize, which maybe you probably knew, but I hadn't ever thought about, he is the highest grossing actor in terms of the movies he's been in.
Yeah. Not the movies he's been the lead in, but the movies that he's been in. Yeah.
And not necessarily how much money he made personally.
Right, exactly.
But because he shows up in all these Marvel movies and Star Wars movies and Jurassic Park and Pulp Fiction and all these things that made lots and lots of money, he is like a lucky charm.
Like in Infinity War, Endgame, and then Spider-Man: Far From Home, just those three. I mean, granted, Far From Home he did quite a bit in, but those three, just in that that 2-year time span, right there. I mean, that's billions of dollars.
Yeah, I really wonder, like Hugo Weaving coming to be the Red Skull in Infinity War for he probably worked a couple of days. Like
that wasn't him.
Oh, it's not him?
No, that is an actor from The Walking Dead. Is it Stephen Marquand?
Marquand, yeah. Or is it Richard Marquand? I think.
Richard Marquand directed Return of the Jedi. It's Stephen something.
Marquand, sorry.
But yeah, he is an impressionist, and one of the impressions he could do was Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull. So he's the one that they put in the makeup.
Yeah, Ross Marquand. Yeah.
Ross Marquand.
You've both ruined my question, but I'm going to stand by it anyway, which is that you come in, you're an actor who's known, and you come in for a day or two. I always wonder, like, well, how much you got to get paid a pretty good check.
Sure.
Because they really want Sam Jackson to come back for, he worked 2 days on this, maybe.
Right.
Maybe. And then we have credits. And of course, we have our post-credit sequence, and it's Cap in a gym, punching a heavy bag, punching it faster, knocking it off the chain across the room, and we hear,
"Trouble sleeping?"
You here with a mission, sir?
I am.
Trying to get me back in the world?
Trying to save it.
And then, strangely enough, you go into a preview for the Avengers.
John, do you remember, was that at the screening that we went to?
I don't think it was. I think it was later when we went to see the actual thing, which they do sometimes at Comic-Con when they do these screenings. They kind of hold off on certain things. But yeah, this was a kind of interesting attempt to get people to understand this, that they are creating essentially a connected universe. Because this hadn't really been done at this scale in the past. So this was their attempt to kind of make sure people understood what they were doing here. And it's yet another reason why I think it's the first real Marvel Cinematic Universe movie that connects everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I had always wondered if this was always the plan, that the Avengers trailer was going to be the post-credit sequence, because that sequence of Steve waking up modern day, I'm like, what a great post-credit sequence. Like, it literally ends with the kid holding the shield, you do your credits, and then boom, like you have Steve waking up in the modern day. Like, I wonder if that was possibly the original plan, or if they were like, nope, we want to get the first footage of the Avengers out there.
Yeah,
I am totally with you. I think as a movie, a self-contained movie, the Steve waking up as the post-credit sequence is way more dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the end of Captain America: The First Avengers. By the way, when they started production, their plan was, we don't want to do a lot of CGI. We don't want to do let's make everything practical. It's a period piece. We want to make it all feel real and gritty. They ended up with 1,600 effect shots.
Wow. Jesus.
And of course, footage was shown at Comic-Con, which you guys are there for. And then it was released on July 19th, 2011. And what's so cool, Joe Simon, who created Captain America, who sued to stop the movie in 2000, was there at the age of 98 for the premiere in 2011.
Wow.
And he died a few months later in December.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, but how beautiful that he lived long enough to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It outgrossed Thor. It killed X-Men First Class and killed Green Lantern. Green Lantern was destroyed by Captain America: The First Avenger.
Rightfully so.
It grossed over $370 million, making it, interestingly enough, the third highest grossing movie from World War II.
Wow. I hadn't even thought to put it in that category.
I wouldn't have either, but Wikipedia gave me this piece of information.
I'm curious, is Saving Private Ryan?
Saving Private Ryan is one. And you mentioned earlier both the director and the star of this film, John, someone who you had to be in good shape and maybe do a lot of running for.
Wow. Pearl Harbor is number 2?
Pearl Harbor is number 2.
That is fucking heartbreaking.
What a crime.
Right?
That movie is a shit show, man. Other than the
terrible.
Pearl Harbor bombing,
Yes.
everything else around it is absolute shit. Oh.
Yeah.
And
It's an absolutely terrible movie. I will give my final thoughts first, which is I feel like I've said them, which is Act 1 up to the creation of Captain America. I absolutely adore this movie. And the rest of it I like, and I think we've really highlighted the things that could have, for me, made it a little bit better. But I find it a totally enjoyable movie, and it's certainly, I agree with you, John, this is what launches the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is what says, no, we're creating a universe here, and we're going to keep going.
Here's what I'll tell you about this. I absolutely think this film still holds up. And I think as I've, sometimes when you talk about films on the Cine-Files, when Steve and I do it, or when Steve and I do it with a guest, you can come away with a different point of view about a film a little bit. And I think I have to agree with you guys about the second half of the film. And as much as I have a kind of a nostalgic, hazy feel about this movie, that I love it for what it was and what it represented and how close it came to like really showing you the Superman formula still works. Even with our modern audiences, because we always yearn to believe in the good. I do have issues with the back half with you, and I agree with some of the issues you guys have brought out. That being said, I still love this movie to pieces. I think Chris Evans is absolutely incredible here. I love the costume here. I love the chemistry between all the actors and the times they get to show themselves. I think the Red Skull is so well done here, and it's a shame that Hugo Weaving did not want to come back and ever do it again, and still is adamant that he will never come back and do it again, which is such a shame. And also, I like the feeling that you get coming out of this movie, which is that this is symbolizing what we aspire to be, what we want to be. And in some ways, which I think is great, the Captain America character, for better or worse, as the films go along, represents America, both the good and the bad. And I think that's a fascinating thing to explore within the MCU. And I appreciate that you've got someone like Chris Evans, who even when he's doing certain things that are a bit self-serving, you can go along with it and then later question it and wonder why you went along with it. So this is the movie that lays the foundation that allows you to care for this character and go along on his journey all the way to Endgame. And thankfully so. So Joe Johnston deserves an incredible amount of credit for what he was able to direct here with this movie.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think it's 28 movies now that have been released. I mean, it is an embarrassment of riches. Like, does everyone hit? Of course not. Most of them fall in that pretty good category. You have some that are exceptional, and you have one or two or three that are like, not for me. Captain America, for the first Avenger, is definitely top tier for me, on the bottom of the top tier. And that is in no way an insult. I mean, I think it's such a great movie. It just perfectly captures sort of the innocence of that time period. And as I said at the beginning, like, if Chris Evans is not cast as Captain America, who knows if the Marvel Cinematic Universe turns out the way it did? Yeah. Because with Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, the yin and the yang of our heroes, we got such an incredible journey, especially leading up to Endgame, 23, 24 movies. And watching, I think Steve Rogers has the most interesting journey in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it's interesting how he and Tony, it's sort of telegraphed in the Avengers, how Steve says to Tony, "You're not the one to make the sacrifice play." And ultimately, that is what Tony does. And Steve talks about, or Tony basically says to Steve in one of the movies, like, he doesn't live. Like, I can't remember the exact quote, but basically, Steve makes that choice at the end of Endgame to go back and have his happy ending, to go and live with Peggy. And we hear about all the actors that had read for Captain America. Like John Krasinski has a very funny interview on one of the late night talk shows. I forget which host, but he was trying on the Cap outfit, and at the same time, and he was feeling good. He was in 13 hours shape. And then Chris Hemsworth walked down the hallway and went, "Hey, you look good, mate." And he's like, "Yep, I don't want to be Captain America." But Chris Evans, I think it was probably it was definitely a surprise of his casting at the time because he'd been Johnny Storm, and the whole idea of an actor playing two heroes, I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. I don't like that. How right they were to not just go for him, but to repeatedly go for him because he did say no so many times.
So that is what we think of Captain America, the First Avengers. And, at the beginning of this year, we laid out this plan that our goal was to do every Marvel movie on the 10-year anniversary of when it came out. But unfortunately, that meant we had catching up to do. So this year, we have done Iron Man 2, Thor, we did Incredible Hulk, and we have now done Captain America, the First Avenger, which brings us up to 2012 and the one movie that we can do on its 10th anniversary, and that is The Avengers. And after that, we will only be doing a couple of Marvel movies a year and 10-year anniversary of when they come out.
Yeah. And if I can say one thing, we are recording this on the anniversary of D-Day. And I think that's a very important, interesting kind of synergy of events to lead us to this moment to record it today. This second part, World War II film and all of that. So, just to kind of honor the sacrifices of the soldiers who laid down their lives on D-Day and, helped us win the war. So just a commemorative thing and kind of a blessing for us to be recording this on that day, a film that kind of honors that in its own way as well.
And you're saying that anniversary is more important than the 10-year anniversary of a Marvel movie?
Yes. Yes, I am.
And I agree. I'm really glad you brought that up. I hadn't thought about it. That is a really great point. And so that's what we think of Captain America, the First Avenger. But of course, we always want to hear what you think. You can visit us on our Facebook page or on Twitter at Cine_Files, on Instagram at Cine-Files Podcast. You can follow the show on YouTube and subscribe there. Leave your comments. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Leave some reviews there. And of course, you can follow me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram, and Enterprise Incidents for all your Star Trek needs. John, how would people find you?
You can always find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, and my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, and my other podcast, The Geek Buddies with Shannon, which Shannon is a part of, and The Top 10.
Well, speaking of Shannon, thank you so much for coming on the show. Yeah. It has been so great. I honestly can't imagine talking about this kind of a movie without you.
Oh, thank you guys. This was a lot of fun.
And let's say someone wanted to find Shannon McClung. How would they go about doing that?
Well, you can do it on Twitter at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy, and you can see some of my writing wares that I'm peddling on Netflix now for Strawberry Shortcake, Barry in the Big City, and as Johnny mentioned, you can see me every week with him on the Geek Buddies, actually twice a week, because we have our regular show and we also have our reviews of Obi-Wan Kenobi on Disney Plus right now.
That's been a lot of fun. I got to say, the spoiler reviews on Geek Buddies are some of my favorite. I listen to them the moment I can. I love them.
Oh, thank you.
Very kind.
And I think that is it for this week. And we'll be back next time on the Cine-Files for another great film.